Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of The Guru. My name is Howard Falco. I am glad you're here. Today, I have a longtime friend of mine on the show today who actually was my business partner for a while in my former life, some 20 years ago in the financial industry. Um, but the friend of mine is Scott Coyle, and Scott is currently the CEO of a company called ClickIPO that has developed a very unique app for the small investor as a way to participate in initial public offerings or IPOs of companies going public, giving the small investor the same access that the big investor has to stock when these companies go public. So Scott and I have been friends for a long time, and he's been listening to the podcast, and he's been mentioning for a while that he's wanted to come on and ask me some questions that he believes will be beneficial to anyone listening. So I said, hey, let's do it. So here we are. Scott Coyle, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Howie, thank you for having me. It's great to see you. Obviously, I've been following you for a long time, and we're friends. And I thought it would be interesting if I could ask a few questions, and we'll see where this goes. It should be fun.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it because you've said for a while that you've had some interesting questions, and that's what I'm all about. I'm all about trying to just give information that people are interested in knowing based on my work. And as I have known for many years, the questioner is often asking questions for a large group of people. So it'll be interesting to see what you've got. So all I could say, Scott, is fire away, bud.
All right, Howie. So let's start with this one. You grew up in Chicago, and then you wound up moving to Arizona. Why Arizona? How did that happen? How did you wind up in Arizona?
So it's a great question. When I was 13, my family took a trip out west. We drove out in a paneled station wagon, just like the movie. What's the Chevy Chase movie?
The family
Oh yeah,
truckster.
yeah. It was Vacation. Yeah, it was literally out of that movie. Our car broke down several times on the way, but we did the whole west trip through Nevada and Arizona and California. And when we went through Arizona, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the mountains. I fell in love with the West. And I knew that someday that I wanted to come back there. So when I was looking for colleges to go to and trying to get out of the Chicago cold, Arizona State seemed like a great place. If I was going to go to college, I might as well go somewhere where it's warm and sunny and look like it was fun. So really, I landed at Arizona State. So that's how I came out west. And then I never looked back. And my family eventually came out. So that's how I ended up out here.
Well, great. And so living in Arizona, was that different than the north side of Chicago, the Gold Coast where you grow up, where
The
you grew up?
Gold Coast. Yeah, hardly. The Northwest suburbs. Is that what you're talking about of Chicago? The suburbanites, as they
You,
called us.
you know I'm teasing you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Arizona was much different. It was much more laid back. But when I first came out, it was, as you know, you're in the college bubble. So it was really about the whole college experience. So um, but it is different than the Midwest.
So you got through college, a finance degree, or is it marketing?
No, well, it was a marketing major, finance minor in the
Okay.
business school at Arizona State. Yeah.
So you got out of college, and then how did you get into the finance industry? What was the next step? Did you
Well, I
always
was,
want to be in?
yeah, I was that was the goal, was to get a job in the financial industry. Growing up, I've told this story many times, but I kind of grew up in not the most stable financial household. So I thought, well, if I got to go to college and learn something, I might as well learn how to be good with money. So that's why I gravitated towards the financial industry. And when I got out, I was looking for a job either as an apprentice or to help somebody to get a start. And a guy I knew gave me a start in the business. So I got licensed and started to build my career and my clients.
It was interesting, and for your listeners in the finance business, Howie was one of the best at the time. So he was very good at what he did. So it doesn't surprise me that you're having success now. In your new business you've created the last 15 years.
Oh, well,
Um,
that's nice of you.
So Howie and I were together for, I don't know, 10 years or so, and we were business partners. And we had an opportunity that came up. I don't know if you remember this, but I flew to Barbados on vacation and I picked up a book. It was called Trading in the Zone. And I came back and told Howie, hey, this is the best book I've ever read. And Howie the author had written a prior book. I think it was
That's
called
right.
The Disciplined Trader,
That's right. Yeah.
which
Mark
I hadn't
Douglas.
read. I
Yeah.
thought this was the greatest book I'd ever read. And then that guy, a guy named Mark Douglas, um, he had a seminar, and Howie and I decided to attend his seminar begrudgingly because it was very expensive, and we were wondering if we're going to get anything out of it. But I remember the impact of that seminar with what Mark Douglas was saying. So what do you think of Mark? You know, when I just remember parts of that where he was talking about trading and how your belief system defined, you know, how you traded. It wasn't really, it wasn't so much about charts and graphs and other things we were looking at the time, but it was like your things that you believed determined how you would trade. So do you remember the impact of that seminar? And
Yeah. So a couple things. So first of all, just to clarify, you went on a vacation. You came back. You said, I read this book called Trading in the Zone. I, at the same time, was reading another book by the same author called The Disciplined Trader. Both books are about the psychological nature of how your mind works in trading the market. And we both gravitated to it. I was fascinated by the angle, which is that it's not really the investment or the amount of money or where you buy or sell, but it's really about your internal psychological makeup that determines what you create from gains or losses in the market. And that's what caught my interest. And so we both realized we were reading the same author, just different books, and we decided to see if we realized he was a local Scottsdale author, which we couldn't believe, and that he had a seminar right down the street from where we were. So everything kind of lined up, and it was expensive. We did pay for it at the last minute, and we went. And that seminar, as I've talked about many times, was a catalyst to my first, what I call peak experience of transformation, where I started to realize the amount of control that I had within me to determine my experience of life. So I do remember the crystallizing moment, or one of them in that seminar. It was on the second day of the seminar. It was a 3-day seminar, and he was talking about specifically the nature of regret, which I've talked about in my work for years since that time. And he was talking about this idea, to really bring it down to really one moment that really created a shift, was when he's talking about trading. He said, regret is really wasted energy, because if you could have done better, you would have. And that one bounced off my head, and my brain just went crazy on that, thinking, no, there's got to be, I should have done better. I could have done better. I would have done better. And what he was saying, though, I knew had a lot of truth to it, but I was in this process of blocking it until finally, by the end of that second day, I couldn't block that truth anymore. And it was like all the regret in my entire life over anything that I thought I should have, could have, or would have done better just vanished. And it created what I call the crack in the egg for me, where I started to see how the way we think affects our reality. So that's how that moment unfolded. And by the third day, I was already starting to enter this state of bliss on my realizations, not just about the financial markets, but about life in general. And I knew that I was opening the door to something really powerful. I didn't know the hows yet of how I was going to do it, but I just had a great sense of hope that what I'd been searching for my entire life, some of the deeper answers to life, were about to be unveiled. And it started to happen through that moment in that seminar, where I let go of regret on a mass scale.
yeah, I remember when that happened, Howie. I remember how that changed, you know, how your thinking changed at that time. And I didn't know what it was, what it would become, or what you've evolved into down the road. But I mean, I've often thought about that. I know there are no coincidences. So can you talk about that? I mean, why did I happen to pick up a book and read at the same time you're reading another book, the exact same author? And then we came back, and I don't know if you remember this, but the reason we went to the seminar is there was a trade. I was in a trade, and I thought I should do it one way. You thought we should do it a different way. And it was like, and then it was like, and you made the comment, hey, let's ask Mark Douglas. Let's send him an email and see what he says. And then he answered that. And then there was communication and we went into it. So I often think about,
Yeah, I remember that.
why did that happen? All of this, you read one, but how did that happen?
Well, I can only tell you from my perspective, but I remember what he said actually about this idea. And he said, if you don't trade based on your own personal reasons, if you get advice from other people, it's going to be the worst outcome because it's going to screw everything up. But why there was a coincidence, look, I didn't understand why we went from, I mean, I knew there was an opportunity going to this new firm, but I was still trying to figure out my whole path in life. And I still didn't understand it. Now, looking back 20 some years later, I can see the exactness of it. But I was on a search for information and answers. Life found a crack in the cement for me through what I was already doing to bring me the insight that I was looking for at the right time for me. And ironically, circling back at this moment, this could be the right time for you, in a different way. But it's all connected. So you were a player, performer, or portrayer in my existence that helped me find that crack in the cement for what I was looking for. And that's really what everybody in our reality is doing for us. They're all helping us to fulfill what we're ready to experience at each moment. And so that's why I believe there were no coincidences that we were both reading the book, that we ended up going there, and that it led to what sent me on my path that I'd been looking for my entire life. And, how that's connected to you is based on your personal view of it, to this moment, whether it happened at that moment, whether it happened 20 years later, whatever. But I can only answer from my perspective, but I know it was related to the curiosity I had as a child about more of the bigger questions of life, the more existential questions of life, meaning, what are we doing here? What's our purpose? How was the universe created? These big questions. And so that was part of the path that led me there to that information.
So do you think you were looking, or do you think it was the seed that opened the door, or was it, and you talk about this in your books, were you just at that time ready to receive information, or were you looking for the information? I mean, what
Well, I think both. I think a lot of people look for information but aren't ready to receive it. So they get it on a daily basis, and it's like they have blinders on and they miss it, or they hear it and it goes in one ear and out the other. It doesn't impact them. But I think both of those, I think I was looking for it since I was 13 or 14, and I had my sort of catalyst experience looking up at the stars on that camping trip. Like, that was a moment that moved me to all these questions. And then since age 13 till that point, which was age 35, I had been a voracious, consumer seeker of insight and information around the world, both consciously and subconsciously. I wasn't overt with it, but I would read books and I would ask questions and I would ponder certain things, and I would question certain dogmas in the world from either religions or science, and just trying to see if something resonated on a bigger level with me. So I was looking for it, and the right moment came. There's a certain moment when the fruit is ripe to pick off the tree, right? But not maybe a month before or a month after. There's a certain period of time where it's perfectly ripe. And so for that moment, I was ripe to hear that message in that seminar. And that wasn't the whole thing. That was just the little door cracker for me, where it kind of opened the door. Like, okay, now I know how to go down this path.
So how does somebody stay ready to be open to receive that information when it appears? Because I've often done this, and you know me, you know me almost better than anybody, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You know me really well, but I've seen times in my life where I've been presented with information, but I wasn't open to really listen to it because I already had an entrenched belief about something, whatever it is. And so how do, not for me specifically, but just anybody, but how do you stay open to receiving that information? Like, how does that work?
So the beliefs that we have that are really core beliefs that are entrenched, they have a lot of energy in them. And when you're offered information that could run counter to that belief, the weapon that the ego uses is fear. And so it'll use fear to protect you from having that belief disappear if you're not ready to live life without that belief. Because the question you're going to ask is, well, who am I without that belief? So let's take an easy one. If you're really a literal believer in your religion's dogma, and someone says, I don't think that's exactly true how that was presented in that scripture years ago. I think it's more of a on a bigger philosophical perspective, not so much a literal perspective. But if you're fearful of expanding your mind on that and not believing that one line, and that's going to make you a bad person because you were taught that all your life, then you're not going to open your mind to go beyond those teachings. You're not going to be able to receive greater information. So I think it comes down to a couple things. One, you have to have an open mind to at least contemplate other information when it comes in, regardless of how counter it is to what you believe to be true. Two, you have to really want this information more than anything, because that's the only thing that'll drive you with courage through the fear. When he said in that seminar, if you could have done better, you would have. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. No, I've lived with regret my whole life. I've lived with regret about decisions I've made, choices. That's been a part of my existence. You're going to tell me that with one line that is eviscerated and I'm free of that? I'm not quite sure who I'm going to be, but I couldn't deny the truth of the statement. So I had to let it go. And once I did, once I stopped fighting and let it go and came to acceptance about the fact that I've done the best I could in every moment, there was this incredible relief. Like I dropped this backpack of bricks and I felt this lightness, but it had to do with a yearning for truth, the willingness to be able to lay down any belief I had that didn't make sense anymore when I had information that was presented that was better information. And I think that's where people block and deny and delude and avoid, because they're not ready, truly ready for the change, because they're just barely hanging on to the ideas they have of who they are now. So you have to trust.
So is that you talk about that in both your books, that so fear in the ego, the way that works. So you have a belief and your ego is going to more or less defend that belief of who you are. And how does fear creep into that? Like, how do you overcome the fear of that? The fear that enters when somebody gives you information that says, hey, I don't think that's accurate, or you should look at it a different way. Like, how do you overcome that fear? Is it peeling the belief back? I mean, which direction do you go?
So that's a great question. So remember what the fear is using. It's using the unknown, because it's telling it, because it's taking that space of the unknown and saying something bad's going to happen if you do this. If you do A, then B is bad. That's what fear does, and that's why the ego uses it as a weapon, because it's easy, really easy. And so if you look at, like, I don't know, you look at the history of like cults, the cult leader always uses fear, because it's an easy way to get you to pay attention and listen, because, well, I don't want to die, so I guess I'll listen to what's being said. So the ego, in its effort to stay in the known, will say, if you drop this belief, you're going into the unknown. Unknown is bad. And what I offer people when it comes to expanding their minds is that the unknown is not bad. It's going to relieve you of suffering if you're ready, if you're truly ready to let go of a false belief. And the reason I say a false belief is because any belief that limits you or the possibility for what you can create is a lie. And so that immediately pretty much tackles every fear. And once you realize that fear is a lie, then you might start to go, okay, well, what's the replacement for that belief? Well, here's the replacement and here's what it could lead to. And this might be better. Now, here's the other thing why the ego is so strong with fear, because you don't know who you're going to be if you've lived 20, 30, 40 years under a certain mindset. You don't know who you're going to be free of anxiety, free of fear, um, free of the beliefs that give you boundary in your world. And I think what life is constantly trying to tell us is that there is no boundary. Life is about expansion. So you might as well let yourself go into it. Life's going to flow a lot easier. Now, I can say that to you, that life's going to flow a lot easier, but until you overcome the fears where your mind says, no, I'm going to be a threat. Things are bad. Things are going to happen to me. I'm not going to be able to survive. Until you get past that noise, you're not going to be able to hear it or listen to it. So that's why I say the big component of it is you have to yearn for it. You have to really be ready for it. And that's why so many people in life, unfortunately, have to hit rock bottom, have to lose almost everything before they're ready to listen and they're ready to transform. But a lot of people in this world can be extremely stubborn and go through a tremendous amount of suffering. A lot of people can be masochists.
So it's fear of so that the way to create your future is through the unknown, but there's fear of the unknown. Is that somewhat accurate?
Yeah, but remember the first time you drove a car, your heart rate was up. Remember the first time you kissed a girl or made love or went into a job interview, or any of these things that are new, that are unknown, that are going to have some impact on your identity based on how well you do, is really, the key. So it makes you scared of it. But when you wanted to learn how to drive, when you wanted to learn how to kiss that girl or be intimate, when you wanted to learn how to get that job, you pushed yourself through it. And after the sweaty palms and nervousness and heartbeat and all the things that go through each of those events, you came off of it and you're like, okay, I did it. I got through it. It was a little shaky, but I'll be better, the next time I get in the car and drive, or the next interview, or etc. So, and you did. Before you know it, it's like riding a bike.
Is this partly why, I guess we're kind of maybe saying the same thing, but is this where fear of change, like people generally fear change? I know I did for many years, maybe I still do to some degree, but that fear of the unknown, or they fear change, it's when they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, as people get older, they aren't as open to change
That's
as when they
correct.
were 18 or 15 or 4.
It's a great point. When you're young, your mind is open and you are exploring the world. And when you're in high school, or if you go to college, like those years are your mind's so open to all these possibilities. What happens as we age is, by design, our minds, and by memory, we start to get more conservative by nature. And as we get more conservative in what we'll do, like whether it's get on a skateboard or ride a bike, or, some things that we did when we were younger, or whether it's take financial risk or something like that, we tend to get more conservative in our minds, or make ourselves more vulnerable. Once we have an identity of who we are to our friends, we're going to try something new. Oh, there's a lot of people that know who I am. So there's more at risk than there was when I was 18 and nobody knew me and the world was at my feet. So yeah, people tend to get more conservative. But what I have found is, the more conservative people get, sometimes their life gets a little more, it's not as joyful, because when you age gracefully, you're open to change. You flow with it. You stay young of heart. I'm not saying you're gonna go off a ramp on your bike when you're 60, but you're not as afraid of the world and the change that happens. I'm always surprised when I talk to my dad, and whether he's on one of the social medias or he's figuring out his new Apple Watch. I think he does that to try and stay a little bit young in what's happening. And a lot of people do that. So, Yeah, that's the nature of what happens when we get older. But what I've learned is that life is the one truth about life, the one constant is change. And so the more open you are to it, the more you'll flow with life and be less afraid of it.
Well, I think that's a great point, Howie. And since we're talking about that change, trying new, doing new things, I feel like there's something above my head in this video that you're going to be very interested in.
So we're on the audio right now on the podcast, but I sometimes put up the YouTubes of these, which I may put up of this one. And in Scott's home right now, there's 3 surfboards above his head on racks because Scott has become an avid surfer, and he's been trying to get me to go out there and surf with him since he started. So that's his little pitch to me to come surfing, which I will do at some point.
You'll do it.
I will surf.
You can swim. So let's talk a little bit further about fear, change, and the other thing I was thinking about, and I know how much this affects me. And maybe I realize it more after I've read your books multiple times. But energy, it seems so important to me. Positive and negative energy, like people like you have positive energy. Our friend Jeff in Chicago, Jeff Bartelt, super positive energy. Like guys that have positive, or people that have positive energy, it just seems like they're just very uplifting no matter what. No matter what happens, they're uplifting, they're upbeat. I really enjoy that. And then there's negative energy, which can be toxic when people are around too much negative energy. So how do you look at that with, the current, I'll say political turmoil in our country, on both sides, both the left and the right, and the political turmoil, and maybe it was always like this 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. I'm not really sure, but maybe because of the presence of social media and media, everything becomes much more exposed, much more front and center, and much, it's just easier if you have the news on or any social media network. There's so much information on both sides, and I just like, how does that affect people? I think there's a lot of negative energy. There's a lot of name calling and negative stuff on both sides.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts to your question. I think one of them is, how do you deal with negative energy and bring more positive energy into your life? Would that be a fair question?
That's the very first one. So you're around negative energy. What do you do? How do you handle that?
Okay.
That's one question.
The second question, which I'll answer after, is more about, we're in an environment that's more polarized, I think, politically than it's ever been before. And the polarization has to do with the separation in views of reality. And one political group is looking at life through one lens, and one political group is looking at life through another lens. And they're so divided in those views that because they can't or won't see each other's side, that creates negative energy and anger about it. You're not validating the way I'm looking at the world. I'm not validating the way you're looking at the world. And therefore, we're staying polarized, and there's a lot of toxicity and negative energy about it. The question is there one view that's more connected in fact and truth than another? And that's something for a whole nother podcast to debate. But let's get back to the question at hand, which is, how do you create more positive energy in your life versus negative or toxic energy? So there's a deeper answer to this, and I want to take this to the core. In my work, I have explained that life is connecting to you based on how your identity about yourself at the deepest level comes together. Not who you think you are, but what your real truth is about who you are at the core. that runs every thought and action that you have. So we can think we're one way, but the truth of who we believe we are shows up in every relationship, connection, experience that we have in the world, work, play, life, etc. So as part of that, there is a cultivation around you up to this point, or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, of a certain energy that has been used to help you get the validation of who you believe you are, negatively or positively. So it's very revealing in that light. What you've surrounded yourself with kind of reveals what you have thought about yourself, maybe to a certain point. But as you evolve and as your awareness and your consciousness expands on the nature of who you are, you begin to have more contrast and discernment over, wow, that energy is really negative. But it may have always been negative. You just didn't realize it or didn't want to see it because it was validating who you were. But now that you've shifted, you're starting to see the contrast more. And you're also starting to see where more people are positive. So that's the good news, is that you're recognizing more positive and negative energy in the world. So the second part of the question is, how do you cultivate more positive energy? So the first part was, why is negativity around you maybe and so toxic? And the second piece is, how do you change it? When it comes to how you change it, as you continue to define yourself under a new identity, one that is more open to positive energy, one that believes himself more worthy of positive energy, one who feels better about themselves and appreciates and respects and honors himself more, you start to automatically, by the nature of that declaration and belief within you, you start to draw in more positive energy and people into your life, which makes the previous people seem even more toxic in contrast, almost intolerable. And it's going to continue to get that way until they either, if they want to stay in your life, they recognize it, see it in themselves, and elevate their own identity. That's why as you change, you can help change the world. That really is the only way to change the world, is by changing yourself, because you have an effect on everybody else, or at least you become a mirror of positivity to help contrast. So to answer how you draw in more positive energy is you keep believing in who you are more, seeing more possibility, and more positive energy will flow to you. The negative energy in your life will most likely either change or fade away, where it moves out of your universe, and your reality starts to shift. And I could take it even one step further, and I've experienced this in my own life. As you become more positive with yourself, loving, compassionate in general, you do put off an energy or an aura or a vibe where even the most negative people around that you meet in a store or on the freeway or whatever become neutralized by your energy, where they can't even bring themselves to be around you. So that's the real high level of it. But that's the progression. It was based on who you were. Nothing you did wrong. Just the outgrowth of childhood traumas, experiences, genetics, and environment. And that's how it collected around you until you realized you were worth more. And then all of a sudden you started to realize it more and you started to shift it more. So it's good news that people are hearing these words right now.
Well, that's a great explanation, Howie. And I just think I was thinking about it in terms of, the political environment, and, it doesn't matter which side you're on. It just seems to me when I look at it that there should be more positivity out there, on either side, not, talking about, the good things you're going to do and the positive things versus the constant, it just seems like it's just gotten way too negative on both sides to me.
It's polarized because the views and the values of what people are looking at have been polarized. And I think the nexus of that separation has been the way that each side is seeing truth. It's been there's not as much common ground between the two political parties on what is truth anymore. There's one view and there's another view, and they're very opposing on so many different issues, whether they're financial issues, whether they're humanitarian issues, whether they're environmental issues, whether they're equality issues, whether they're voting issues. I mean, it's all over the place, and that creates a lot of animosity and anger. And again, when you have that type of a situation, and look, without getting too much into this, if you have a person or people that are purposely stirring the pot on a daily basis or igniting people's deepest fears on a daily basis, you're going to have a lot of negativity and vitriol out there. So that's why it's important, whoever has a loud microphone, that they're setting a tone that's reconciliatory, that's unifying, that's connecting, not divisive. It's very, very important because it's a big megaphone. The bigger, more important you are in the world, and it can cause problems. So no matter who it is, so it's important that tone gets set, because there's not a lot of independent thinkers out there. A lot of people think and believe, just they have some idea that if someone is more accomplished in one area, then they're smarter, and then what they're saying is true, and this may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And hey, Howie, one other topic you touched on a little bit earlier, when you were talking about fear and the ego and the flow of life. So how as your perspective changes or your beliefs change, I mean, how does that affect the flow of life? Like, how do you flow with life versus
Well,
not flowing with life as well?
well, flow is directly correlated with faith. And faith, when I say faith, I mean faith that life is connected to you in a supportive way. What is it supporting? It's supporting your truth. So that's why self-awareness becomes the key to flow, because the more you can see where your beliefs and truth lie in a positive way or a negative way, the more you can change them to a positive way. And then if you trust that life is connected to those truths, then you'll have more faith in allowing whatever comes into your life is serving you in some way, either to expose a false belief you've had about yourself, or to show you where you've been on the right or wrong track, or to guide you to something greater. So if you have faith in this moment and what's happening right now, maybe you can see the connection right now in some way.
So it's happening. I think you told me this once. It's happening for you, not to you, whatever happens.
On any given day, and I say this with all respect for anything anybody's gone through in their life, but I do know that every single thing that happens to every person has meaning and purpose for that individual and their own personal experience and what their soul is here to experience and do based on what their intent is, based on what their beliefs are. So it's very personal. It's hard to know what someone else's path is, but you can know 100% what yours is based on what you dream about, what you want versus what you believe.
Right. And so let me ask you.
Life's trying to close that gap between what you want and what you believe about yourself. So you have to raise who you are to match what you want in order to create it. So it's always showing you that gap in that space.
Boy, that is so true, isn't it? It's easy to realize after the fact sometimes, but if you can see it real time, that's very, very helpful advice. So, speaking of advice, are you working on anything new? You have two books out. Anything new coming up? Any new writings?
I've been writing a third book for about 2 years now, so I'm getting
Okay,
there. It's going to be a powerful one, though, but I'm going to synthesize both my previous books. I Am in Time in a Bottle, and take all the experiences I've had, real time trench work with athletes at the highest level, individuals that have gone through tragedy and overcome them, people that have used this work to immediately change their lives. And I'm going to share those stories, and I'm going to share the wisdom that got them there, and the teaching, which I've done in the previous books, but it's just going to be a more synthesized sort of how to manual in a step by step format. So I'm working on that. I'm doing a lot of individual work with people and athletes. So I'm working on that. I'm working on my foundation, trying to get some classes on self awareness to get into high school so kids can understand themselves a little more before they graduate high school. That's a big mission of mine through the Eight Wisdom Foundation, which is the number eight, wisdom.org. And then I'm also working on some other media stuff. I'm trying to put together a fun reality TV show that has this work in it so people can see it happen real time, stuff like that. Just whatever I can do to expand this work.
so let's talk about the Eight Wisdom Foundation, because that's always been I thought that's always been very interesting to me where you're going with that. But fast forward 5 years or 10 years, the Eight Wisdom Foundation, where are you at? What are your goals and objectives with the Eight Wisdom Foundation? And not I don't mean necessarily in the next 6 months, but 5 or 10 years out, like a good period of time.
5 or 10 years out, there's a manuscript on self awareness called Self Discovery 101, where it's being taught in every single high school in the country and hopefully around the world, where kids can get a greater understanding of what's possible of them and the nature of who they are, along with math, science, reading, and writing. So I'm hoping that the Eight Wisdom has that kind of an impact on um, I'm sorry, not a manuscript, a curriculum out there to be taught on general self awareness and self understanding. And then going to try and build a major center for self empowerment and personal excellence based on the work of self awareness. I'd like to put together a center, a destination, a learning destination where people from all over the world can come and really get true renewal of mind, body, and spirit. I'm sure there'll be other, things to do like meditation, yoga classes like that, but along with the teaching of how to transform your mind to the highest level of personal possibility. So those are two of the main goals of the foundation. So that would be my dream in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I hope you make the dream a reality, Howie. It's certainly needed in this world. I mean, it's the work that you're doing. I mean, I've seen it. I've known you for a long time. I've seen the last 10 to 15 years of how you started and what you've gotten to, and how you've built this, and how you've learned and continued to grow what you're doing. And I think that's just going to be a fantastic opportunity for people in general that can be involved with your teachings and your work in the Eight Wisdom Foundation, and however you choose to actually roll that out in the future. But I applaud you for going down this path. It's been fun to sit here and watch you from a from a not too far distance.
Right. Well, Scott, I really appreciate that. You've been a great friend for a long time. You were there at the epicenter when the egg cracked, and then eventually 6 months later when it shattered. So you've seen the whole transformation, and I appreciate your support and friendship on all of it. And I appreciate you, coming on and asking these questions today.
Yeah, it's been great, Howie. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope it wasn't. I hope your listeners will get some benefit out of it. I thought I would kind of start at the beginning, and when you were in Chicago, and walk
Yeah.
through not too many details on finance. That could take us. That'd be a 24-hour podcast. So
Yeah, exactly.
we don't want
No,
to do that to anybody.
no, the questions were great, and I think it provided some great stuff that came out and hopefully it will help a lot of people. So yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and asking them, and as always, I appreciate all the support always, Scott. So thanks for being here.
All right. Thanks for letting me ask a few questions. How I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next time on The Guru. So long.